bit of a breakdown. Oh, there you go. Just to get a little bit of an overview of the breakdown of this presentation, it actually has two parts. So I'm going to talk about reflection in and on action using highlights, lowlights, and aha moments, which is a tool that we have adopted from an existing practice. And the part two is scaling peer feedback using AI-assisted analysis in large student cohorts. So to give you some background of the subject that I've run, last semester we were planned to have 300 students. We ended up with 280, but it grows every semester. Students work hands-on on a project where they build a robot for the Woman Design and Build Challenge. But all the practices that I'm going to be presenting are very much transferable across any sort of subject and any sort of discipline. But to get an idea how we embed these practices, so we work in agile sprints. So the semester is divided into 4 sprints, where we start with the problem definition, we're going to the design, selection and prototyping, and then the build and testing, and then the final one is the validation, and where students compete against each other. To scaffold this semester, we do have individual and team associated tasks. So students draft final submissions, and these are their portfolio drafts that we call them. As a team, they also have to come together to build the full robot, and they had design reviews where they come in and present verbally in front of their peers, but also an assessor that will be present. During these, they get teacher and peer feedback. So the teacher feedback is verbal, and they are responsible to take notes and actions from what they hear during these presentations from the teacher. And the peer feedback is written, and this is the process that I'm going to walk you through today. Now, at the end of each sprint, or rather in the beginning of the next sprint, they have a reflective practice where they reflect on things that they really liked or struggled with, and when they had like that aha moment, the realization. So that's something we do in class together with the students, and that's the actually the first practice that we will be talking about. So highlights, lowlights, and aha moments. So together with Beata Francis, I saw her on the call here. We adopted an old faculty model, which was highlights, lowlights, and insights, and made it more practical by having the aha moments. But what I did was to embed this in with how students work in class, using a very practical language as well. Quite often students get confused when we ask them, all right, go reflect on what you've learned, and they get a little bit scared and taken back. But what I've done is to put this into a Microsoft form. So please scan the QR code if you can, and you'll get the actual example form. You can fill it in if you want, or just have a look at what students actually get when they scan the QR code in class. So this was a tool that we've also published in the Engineering Futures initiative. So the highlights involved identifying and celebrating successes, so something positive. Maybe they developed something and they're really excited about it. Lowlights, again, probably the opposite. So sometimes when they've struggled, it's about having that critical reflection to the problem solving and acknowledging where they get stuck or where something negatively impacted them during the session, which is quite useful for us because sometimes these will actually give us some practical insights where we can improve during the semester. And then the aha moments, it's there to promote metacognition and adaptive learning. So where they recognize that they've actually had one of those, I get it. And it's super interesting to see the sort of aha moments students reflect on, because it also gives us insights where we can help other students. So the results from this, we actually share back with students. So we sort of have that feedback loop, if we want to call it that, because even though it's reflection, they very much provide us with feedback that we can use to improve the subject while it's running as well. Now, one of the important parts of this process, so having 280 students, we can't be sitting reading through all those responses and making meaningful conversations with them in class. But by using AI, we can actually decode this and find patterns of what students are reflecting on, and also give us really good insights on how we can use that to make improvements, but also very neatly and quite productively give us responses to feedback to the students. Now, it's important to actually ask for their consent before taking all their reflections and popping them through AI, because we do have a few students that don't actually want to be having their work put through AI. So some of them are just not comfortable. So I work quite closely with them because I'm in all my sessions face to face with students. So I always tend to ask, and sometimes they even tell you, I'll put a no for this one. And you just ask them, why is that? And they just don't want to, they don't trust it. They still very much on the fence. And for other students, just that it's a low engagement thing. They didn't actually put anything useful. And we can see that when we look at it manually, it's like, meh, it was okay, I'm all right. Others were just unsure of why we wanted to use AI. So they just put no. And others just like, oh, I don't know, I just put no. So it's good to give them that, to give them a chance to actually consent if they want their work put through an AI. And also because we're quite openly choosing which AI to use. So we do use Copilot, but for a while, Copilot did not give us an adequate response, even when we did put through the reflections. Also because it has a limited word number. So I use ChatGPT for most of my, when I generate the responses to students. Now, if you weren't able to scan the QR code, this is just a quick overview of what it looks like for students. It's just a simple form of what to fill in for the highlights, the purpose, and a little hint of what to include. So we spend about 15 minutes in class doing this. Similar for the lowlights, just a simple instruction. And students tend to go quite critical in the lowlights. It's actually quite great to read it. They love telling us what we can do better as well. And I really appreciate it because it helps us change things in action rather than waiting for the end of the semester when we get the final student feedback survey. And similar with the aha moments. So again, these are just what you would see if you would have scanned the QR code for the Microsoft Teams template. But I think the important part is what we do with the prompts themselves. So obviously how you prompted, there was an interesting discussion just before this on what we feed into the AI versus what we get out of it. I tend to always have an empty chat. You can also use the sort of incognito, not saving data chat on ChatGPT. But you also need to be clever in terms of what you're looking for. So the first one might be as simple as just finding patterns. So just find a pattern across all these reflections, and it will quite neatly map out what these are. You can ask for categorization and keep it close to the student's language. I sometimes ask to also embed some quotes in there using the data that is available. And obviously the frequency emphasis is also quite interesting because it helps students also see what other people think. So if we get something that's like a 50% of students really dislike the way we have the presentations, they want to use a different room, that setup that you had was terrible, help us out here. It really helps us see where we can actually do those changes, but also when we feed back to students the things that they really like or where they were really successful. So I think one of the best hints I've gotten is from one of these exercises where students are struggling with teamwork. And one student had reflected that just giving someone a thumbs up in a Teams chat is sometimes enough to understand that the rest of the team is listening and they are actually engaging with you. And we can use that as a practical example in class. And then the following time we did the reflection, other students had also reflected on this, which is quite interesting to see when you follow how those patterns change. But then you can also do a bit more investigative prompts to analyze the reflection, write a short practical suggestion. Now, I've had some hits and misses with this, because when you do something that's quite new and innovative, depending on the AI, you sometimes want to go back to very traditional settings of what they think is a good classroom. So I often get the advice, well, you should be adding marks to your assessments because that's what students want. But that's not what we want. So it's important to still have that human in a loop when you are prompting and investigating. The other aspect is to also have like an educated lens to it. So you can ask it to feed back only for your purpose or for the teaching team's benefit. I like extracting when they reflect on the tutors, for example, and then I can send it to the teaching team and say, hey, they think you do that really nice. They have a really good interaction with the teaching team. The other aspect of it is that we also can spot when there's like well-being concerns. So in this particular exercise, we don't record the students' names or IDs. So we can't necessarily trace it back, but we do have timestamps. So we can sort of trace it back into the different classrooms that we are in, and at least then try to see and investigate if there is someone really struggling in that class. So it's all about what you do with your prompting. And that's where it's sort of like an abundance of different prompts that you can use to investigate depending on your purpose. So I use a lot more than these ones because I like really digging into it. It's a bit like a data mystery and find those patterns. Now, these are some example of student highlights. So again, it's a very practical subject. They really like the prototyping, hands-on skills, skill development with various softwares. Some of them, and I think this is what's really nice, they really like the collaboration. That's for some people a highlight, where they really find it valuable when they have that positive teamwork going. But you'll find that it's also one of the biggest lowlights. So what can be a highlight for some students can also be the low light for other students. So being able to feed both of those back to them is very interesting, because then you can have that conversation more honestly with students as well of how the teams are traveling and what they're doing to get to know each other better, or really depending on what's going on within the teams. And then on the right-hand side, that's just the raw data, just a little screenshot of some examples. And those were the students that had ticked yes, I'm happy for you to share this publicly. So that was another aspect why I wanted to add an additional little query in there to get their consent. Example of lowlights. So the number one tends to be the team dynamics. So team collaboration, same with time management. Technical difficulties is a very common one, and we're aware of this one. Unfortunately, it's bound to the facilities of UTS, but we can at least feed that back so students know that it's sort of out of the control for us, but we can still then record that data. And then having some various struggles with the different concepts. And for some students, they want more feedback. So they do get a lot of feedback in this subject, but unless you specifically tell them, now you are getting feedback from me, they might not appreciate that. Just talking back and forth might also be an opportunity for feedback and the assistance that they might need. And again, just some of the raw comments that students would have provided. Aha moments, they're often related to those creative breakthroughs. So like really when they go from working in software and then seeing it physically working tends to be a quite big aha moment for our students. Using tools, but I also like when we see the learning efficiency. So they realize they can actually have a simpler approach to really complex tasks. So they often start with this big piece of work and they come in and realize that they can restructure it to both save time and do their work more effectively. And again, application of feedback. So we'll see the gap as a low light, but then also applying the feedback for some people, a real aha moment. Now, this is not really what we feed them back, but it's an example. It's very wordy, but just to see how you can actually feed back information to students. So decoding the patterns first using AI, and also get it to help you found your responses. Now, in this case, I've written most of the responses myself. Having a little action item to show students that we do take some of their feedback if they have struggles in their reflections, that we do take it on board and try to do something about it. So in the case of the technical challenge, it's bound to the use of the Citrix software at UTS. And unfortunately, it's a central IT matter that we can't resolve very quickly. But when it comes to time management and workload, we do definitely see students doing various things inside the classroom, which are not really helping them in terms of the workload or time management. So being able to see which classrooms they work in, as well as having like a generic overview of if you are struggling, let us know, let us help you, and somewhat just flagging that we are there. So again, this is just a way to show that you can use the reflection students are doing for their own learning and decode them into actionable items as someone teaching as well. Now, I don't know if we want to take a little pause, if there are any specific questions for this part before I move over to the second part of the presentation.
As yet, Hannah, there are no questions in the chat, but we could open it up. Anyone would like to raise their hand if they have a question, or just speak up. It's always a possibility.
Otherwise, I'm just going to travel along with the next part.
Okay.
Will be a little bit more integrated, I hope, as well. So this is about the scaling of peer feedback. So like I mentioned before, we have those design reviews where students present in front of us and their peers. Last semester, because of the size of the subject, to fit all those presentations within a certain time frame, it could be up to 20 people in the room while they were presenting. So those 20 people are giving individual feedback to the team that's presenting, which gives you a lot of data points of feedback, you might imagine. So, skipping a little bit too far. So one of the things that we experience is the overwhelming feedback volume. So having a lot of feedback is great, but when it becomes too much, it becomes too cluttered and difficult to process, both for us, but also for the students. If we give them, I think the first iteration, we gave them the raw data and they're like, oh, this is terrible. This is so much. And they're all saying different things. What do we do with this? So also the variable feedback quality. So it can be really insightful. But if someone is a bit of a harsh reviewer, like your reviewer too, students might actually take like an emotional effect to the feedback they get as well. And we see that a lot where they get almost a little bit offended by the feedback that they might have gotten. And it's also a chance for us to have a quick review and make sure that some things might be filtered. In this process, though, the names are recorded, so they are very much aware that you shouldn't say anything inappropriate or anything, any sort of slander or bullying across these sort of feedback exercises, because we thought that might be a risk if we were to make these ones anonymous, and we don't want to make student feel uncomfortable presenting in front of teams. It's supposed to be a safe space. But also students also need structured support. So without the guidance, they get too much feedback and they end up ignoring it because they can't pick which one is valuable or not. So the process that we use, very similar to the previous one, we have a QR code that the student scan, which takes them to a Microsoft form, ensuring that we capture the data. And then we use AI to synthesize the feedback as well as making suggestions. And we don't just give that to students. It's sort of a facilitator student interaction, so they can discuss first of all the feedback process. So they also follow through by showing the students, this is the raw data, this is the prompt I'm going to give it, and this is the report that you get. And then we share the report with students and discuss where there might be some differences as well. Now, this is what the form looks like. So because we have so many labs and group numbers, we had to divide the group naming in the first part. They have an open-ended box where they write their feedback, and we can talk with them afterwards on how to write the feedback as well when they receive theirs. And this is just a rubric transferred, so they just click in what they want. And again, the consent for using AI. So similar to before, not all students consent to the use of AI, and in a very similar manner to before as well. We get students saying no, but when we look at the raw data, they actually haven't written any feedback. Everything's just great, and then it's empty, or they say it was great. So they're sort of aware that they're also not engaging with the actual feedback process. And unfortunately, it also depends which group is presenting and when. Maybe they write a lot more for the first group versus some of the later groups, or the other way around. Now they've heard what the teaching team is saying, and they sort of copy the language and put it into the feedback form. So there's all these little variables across. So if you haven't used a Microsoft Forms before, this is what it will output. So a lot of data points for that 300 student subject, that's thousands of data points. So making sure to, in the right-hand side, to filter for yes, that we can use AI. And then depending on how you set up your lab groups, you can always filter them based on the groups that you are using. So again, because of the size, we just give the group's naming conventions after the lab and a number. And that will then make only the feedback available for the particular teams that we're talking to. For consistency, we have the same prompt. So I give the prompt to the teaching team. We've had a few variables in here as well. So in the past, I gave a prompt. Not everybody used it. They used their own different methods for it as well. But this semester, we've used give helpful peer feedback with suggestions for improvement, comment on team's overall average performance, point out the main strength and what could be improved, and note any unusual ratings or feedback. So that last part has to do with students that provide a novice, which is a fail, and then they write great job, or they provide novice, whereas other people have said excellent, or the other way around. So where there's like significant gaps between all the students is sort of thus the averaging for us. And that lets us talk about the outliers. So we can sit with the students and talk about where has this differed. We can then look at their raw responses, and then we might discuss what notes they took for the mentor feedback as well that they got live. So as a process to put this to ChatGPT, it's very straightforward. Just copy the data across into ChatGPT goes alongside the prompt that I showed before. And it then generates this report, which is quite easy for students to understand, given it gives you the dot points and some actions, areas for improvements, and again, talks about that unusual or mixed feedback, and then a final summary. And students quite appreciate this process. They do like seeing the raw data as well. They do sometimes want to see the comments, what they've actually written. And I think that's completely fine. But it does give us that additional filter if there was anything that wasn't completely fair that students put in there, to discuss it open with those teams, or alternatively remove it before we show it to the students. So the process compared to the old one, it's a lot faster. This is something we can do live in class alongside with the students, whereas previously we had to copy paste or upload just pieces of the feedback to students. And that's obviously a time and a cost thing as well. So instead of putting the time outside of class, doing one single task, or having a tutor in class sitting dealing just with the data processing, we can have them walking around in class and doing this live. So it's more of an interactive process. It's also more like the consistency is a lot clearer because they all get the same scaffold. It's more of a positive reinforcement, so they don't get that same emotional effect as they got with just getting the raw feedback. So again, they also get less upset with criticism. And quite often when you discuss it with them, they're like, oh yeah, that's fair enough. We didn't include that. So I can see why they thought that wasn't that great. And then obviously the learning impact is just that it gives a clearer understanding to students, but also more motivated to act on the feedback. So when you talk to them, because they have more of a clear trajectory of where to go next, they sort of have their checklist ready. They might have taken notes while we were discussing. And you can just see the difference compared to that overwhelmedness you saw when they just got raw data without any sort of scaffold. So some key takeaways, and this is for both of the sections today. One of the things with using AI in this way, it really enhances the learning support. So more so, I mean, it enhances the learning for the students, but it also supports us to actually help teach the students. So it provides actionable insights without adding any workload. However, and I didn't put that on the slide, but it's important to have that human in the loop that I saw Beata commented on. Just going with the raw translation, it's a bad call because sometimes it gives recommendations that you just don't agree with, or they might not align with what you're trying to do with the students. And for the feedback, it's just easier to give it to students. It's scalable, efficient for those large student cohorts, but it also improves the clarity and the timeliness that we can provide the peer feedback to students, and to also have that conversation alongside the feedback. And ethical integration. So because students are allowed to use AI in my subject, I do think it's important to also have the conversation about the ethical use of AI. So do we ask for consent to put things through there? I give examples on, I had some capstone students that just put in one of my external stakeholders report into ChatGPT or elsewhere to get some images, even though the document said official. But it's like a nice conversation to be able to have with them as a starter, just by integrating it in something so simple as forms. And then broader adoption and future research. So both of these processes are currently getting published, or one of them is still under review, but the second one, the feedback practice, will be presented at WEEF, the World Engineering Education Forum, next week by Kat, that's also on this call. And then the highlights, lowlights, we are doing a version of this for A Square, E Square, hopefully, where a colleague from FEOT has adopted the process, and he's integrated it into weekly. So in his weekly lectures, he does it live with students, so they fill in this reflective form. It worked really well last semester, and once it's done a little bit too long, it sort of overstays its welcome. Students get a bit tired if you do it every single week. But he's been getting some interesting student responses this year. So David Milne from computer science, where students put like little funny, like they want the AI to do a bit like funny comments or things like that. They've all been innocent so far as part of their reflections. So again, be mindful when you put it through that you might want to give it a first little glance because they can interrupt the prompting. So depending on the AI you use, the student might write, AI, please take these instructions into consideration as well. So just to be mindful of if you are planning to doing something like this in a live setting. So I also wanted to show you some of the publications. So the first two were the ones I presented today. I also work with a team from across Australia and later in also in Denmark on abundant feedback. So it's the idea behind AI being able to provide an abundance of feedback. So it's just a new concept paper that we have. And then also we have a journal paper on project work, artificial intelligence integration framework, which we're still investigating. And I believe Sasha was on the call earlier as well. So if you do have any questions on that one, or the lengthy AI network that I work with, he's the guy to answer those questions. And then we have some other AI publications coming through as well. And that is it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Fantastic. Very interesting. I do have a few questions in the chat, and please, if you have other questions, add them in. Joe made the observation it's a great approach to closing the loop on student reflections at scale. And she asked whether the quality of the peer feedback changes over the semester as students get their own feedback and gain practice.
Yes, so it can start out, and we get different types of students. So some of them are already quite feedback literate naturally, or coming in from previous experience. But yes, so the first time they encountered this, first of all, the rubric is more misaligned, and we actually use that to come in to class, and we show the rubric of the teachers versus what the peer students had put. And once we've also had the discussion with the peer feedback and we say, was that feedback useful to you? And they say, no, that wasn't very useful. So how would you rather get feedback? And it's like, oh, I liked how this person put it when we're discussing the raw data. I'll probably do something like that in the future. And then when you come to the later end of the semester, they tend to have a little bit more in there as well. So it's interesting to see the evolution of the feedback.
Lovely, thank you. Joe also made the observation that it was interesting that students were less upset by the AI-generated criticism. And I too was wondering about this and wondered if you had any insights or observations about why that might be.
I think sometimes when students put something, it can be quite abrupt. So it's also without recommendations. So it can be something like, oh, the slides were terrible. And the student's like, what did they mean? What did they mean they were terrible? Or you did this wrong, you should do better. Those short, abrupt, like they're not great pieces of feedback. Like the student's obviously trying to communicate and maybe they weren't doing the best job they could have done. But once you put that through the AI, it sort of softens that a little bit. And especially the teams that are struggling, because we do get teams that are quite disengaged, but they still come in and present. And getting that really harsh criticism can sometimes be a little bit too tough and a little bit too like in your face compared to the AI that might be a little bit softer. So it sort of sandwiches it for them.
Thanks. Solly asked, and sorry if you've missed it, I don't think you did, Solly. Did students use emojis at all in their feedback? And if so, did the AI draw on those to help with themes?
I haven't seen any of them use it, and I think it might be that the forms is doesn't let them enable it. I'm not completely sure, but I don't think I've seen any emojis in the actual forms itself when we look at the Excel. So it might just be the data transfer from online.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering because I know sometimes emojis can get transferred or transcribed into their meaning once it goes into the raw code. But yeah, I was just wondering because that is one way that people communicate more informally when, thumbs up or thumbs down and other emojis. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think it's because the forms doesn't accept them, but I know that it might be something that we are going to look at if we have a different way of not just using Microsoft Forms, but a different sort of platform for students to input their data through.
Thank you.
I have a question from Maze. How did facilitators engage with the feedback after the use of GenAI? You mentioned they got the opportunity to focus on student learning. Could you give an example?
Sorry, I'm just going to reread that. So for me, for example, and even for the tutors, so there was one semester where we had students saying that the sessions are so long where we have to stand up the whole session. And we realized because we were working out of protospace, they had no tables available for them to sit down during a 3-hour-long session. So it was more like a practical intervention that we could use. And same with some of the learning material. So every semester I actually changed the subject to accommodate the insights that we get from students. And it can be anything from, I used to have the rubric with each of the drafts, for example. And then I got a comment from students, someone that had repeated it. And even in the feedback, it was like, oh, it's very difficult to find certain things. So I made a centralized resource and it's in one spot only. That's where they find everything. And then the feedback from the repeating student was like, oh, this makes so much more sense. But really, I changed that because of insights that I got from that reflective exercise where someone was just saying how they struggled finding things, or multiple students had struggled.
Thanks. And I'm just wondering, Sasha notes that it might be that students get used to AI feedback, they get more comfortable with it or more used to that.
Yeah, I think they are more used to getting that AI feedback as well. So that's also why we want to have the mix where the instructor feedback or the teacher feedback is verbal and they're responsible for taking notes so that they get different sort of facets of getting feedback. So verbal, written / provided by AI for the presentation, but for the written drafts, they get written feedback. So they get different types throughout the subject.
I think, there isn't another question, so I'll take the liberty of, I think what I find particularly interesting about feedback is that for so long, it's been the final black box of teaching. We've opened up our classrooms, we've shared our materials through learner management systems, but the feedback has so often been a private conversation between student and teacher or marker, and that rarely students compared their feedback with each other. Rarely did they have a conversation with their teacher about the feedback. And here that is opening that up and making that language of feedback and the impact and importance of it very clear. I wonder if this is having an effect across the rest of their program.
Well, we hope so. So the hopes and dreams for myself was that we would put a survey through where we can see how they changed. I've only gotten verbal feedback from other coordinators that are later in the session where they find that students produce higher quality items after being, I wouldn't call it conditioned, that sounds really bad, that we sort of conditioned them that they can't just deliver something a semi-standard, but they're actually get that feedback and they go back and forth with it to actually refine their work. And they find that they have more of a refined version of their work when they come into those sort of client subjects that we have in MME.
Wonderful, thank you. So just a last opportunity, if you have another question, just please ask it. I'm just going to post up the next session in this series with Bianca on the 25th of September. And I'd like to thank you all for attending and thank Anna very much for a very interesting presentation. So thank you, Anna. Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
Lots of claps for you.